Today I'm going to show you how to edit photos in Adobe Camera Raw. And basically, we're typically going to be editing raw photos in Adobe Camera Raw because they're 16-bit photos and you have more information embedded in the photo in order to be able to edit. However, you can edit JPEGs and TIFFs in Adobe Camera Raw as well. You just won't have as much information to work with, but it is possible. So if you do have a JPEG that you would like to edit, all you need to do is go to Photoshop, Preferences, and then scroll down to Camera Raw and make sure that down here at the bottom where it says JPEG and TIFF handling, that both of them are set to automatically open all supported either JPEGs or TIFFs. And if you have that, go ahead and hit OK. So now we need to open an image into Raw. So I'm going to go ahead and look for this little bunny image that I've been editing and open. And there we have our image. Now here you can see I've already made some adjustments using Camera Raw and then opened a copy into Photoshop so you can actually see the difference. And I'll show you how we can accomplish this difference in the photos by using Camera Raw. Now Camera Raw is its own menu that pops up, but it works in Photoshop. So you would still open Photoshop and then make those adjustments so that you can open up your images into Camera Raw. Now at this point, Camera Raw always has the option over here of hitting auto. You can try that and see how it looks, but most times when I hit auto, I get this. It just doesn't look quite right to me, so I always go back to default. Now, we have the option first of doing our white balance. You can also try an auto white balance on this, and sometimes that will work for you. Or you may want to do a custom white balance where you go in and you make some shifts in your temperature here. You can also do as shot. Now we can go to our white balance tool up here as well, but this works best when you have a gray card. However, sometimes I click on this and just kind of try clicking through in some areas where it might look a little gray. And then if I find a temperature that I think looks pretty good, sometimes I will stick with that. Otherwise, I will just go back and go as shot, and that'll take us back to the original. Now, a couple changes that I want to make with this image. As I'm looking at this rabbit, I'm not really crazy about how much red I'm seeing in the rabbit here. So I want to make some changes in temperature. Now, I could go up here at the top of this menu, this main menu that we have, and go in and adjust to maybe pull out some of the reds by pulling this into the green a little bit, but then that's changing kind of everything here, and I don't really want to see that. So another option that I can do is go about the fourth button over. I get HSL and grayscale, and I'm going to click on that. And HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. Now hue I don't mess around with too much, but basically what that's going to do is shift your color just a little bit. So if you look at the reds here, you can see this side of the red is a little bit orangier, if that's a word, and this side of the red is a little bit pinker or kind of violet. It has a little bit of violet in it. So you can adjust kind of the temperature of each of your hues as you're going through. And again, I don't really mess with this too much because if you white balance correctly, then your hues should be pretty accurate. Where I do adjust though is saturation, because here I have these oranges and reds that are really only appearing mostly through this rabbit, and I'd like to desaturate those a little bit. So I'm going to take my red scale and just pull that down, and you can see already we're losing a lot of that kind of oranginess of the nose. I'm also going to do that with orange here, just pull that down. And now we've taken what was kind of this bright orange in there and we've neutralized it. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now again, I work largely just in this saturation area, but you can also go to luminance, and luminance is going to be more or less value. So this is kind of how dark or how light these different value or these different hues are. So that may be beneficial for different photos. For this one, it's best for me to stick to 0 here. So now I have kind of the colors through the bunny the way that I would like them. A couple other adjustments that you can make. You can go back to your basic menu here in the front, and you can adjust exposure. So if I feel like the entire thing is a little low on exposure, we need a little bit more light, I can pull that up, or I can vice versa pull that down. I'm actually just going to keep that at 0. You can adjust contrast. Highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. A lot of people, when they look at those, they think they're kind of the same thing, but I want you to notice I can take my highlights up in brightness or down in brightness, and notice the 100 plus 100 highlights looks a little bit different than the plus 100 white, because obviously the white is only adjusting the white that's in that photo, and the highlights are adjusting both the white and the lighter values of the photo itself. So same with shadows and blacks. So you can kind of look at those as being similar, but not exactly the same thing. Now, for the clarity, vibrance, and saturation, you can adjust these, but I will say a little goes a long way here. And if you take the clarity too far in one direction, it can look a little garish. So also the vibrance and the saturation, you can make those adjustments through here with a little bit more control. So I would tend to stay away from these last three controls, although you can adjust them a little bit if you'd like. All right, so now we also have this menu up here at the top. And again, I showed you the white balance tool. But unless you have a gray card that you've shot with, that's not going to be super important, but you can play around with that and see how that works. I'm going to skip over here to the crop tool. You can use the crop tool and it works largely as it does in Photoshop, but the nice thing about using crop in Adobe Camera Raw is that nothing that you do is permanent. So you can always go back and retain the information that you've cropped out. So that's always a nice option. Right next to the crop tool is something called the straighten tool. And what that'll do is if I had taken this with a clear horizon line back here, and let's say the horizon line was a little tilted, I could go in with this straighten tool, and all I have to do is draw a line from one side to the other kind of along that tilt. So let's say it was just kind of tilted like this. If I do that, when I let go, it'll snap my picture plane and it'll just kind of crop it and turn it a little bit so that it kind of mirrors that horizon line and it straightens it out. I'm going to undo that, Command Option Z, because I do not have a horizon line in here, so I don't need to worry about that. I'm going to skip over this next tool and go to red eye removal, and that's exactly what it sounds like. If you have a portrait where you have red eye, you can adjust and darken so that you don't have that red eye anymore. And if you just kind of paint that into these different areas, that will allow you to make those adjustments. And then now we're getting to one of my favorite tools, the adjustment brush. And the adjustment brush is going to give you more control of editing than you have in just one layer in Photoshop, because it's going to allow you to make different adjustments to different parts of your image. So when you first click on the adjustment brush, what you'll see is your menu has changed a little bit over here on the right. And now it says adjustment brush on the top, and you have the option of new. Now if you'd already created an adjustment brush, you would have also the options of add or erase, because you could add to an adjustment brush or you could erase some of an adjustment brush. And notice that we have the same relative settings here, or actually not the same relative settings. We have some different settings. You can adjust these settings before you brush, or you can adjust them afterwards. I tend to make a few adjustments beforehand, and then if I need to adjust some more, I'll do that. What I want to do here is just brighten up my exposure of just the rabbit. So I've just pulled that up to 0.5 here just to give that a little bit more oomph. And I'm also going to take the contrast up just a little bit, just to give him a little bit more drama, because he's our focal point, so we want to make him stand out a bit. You can adjust any other options in here before you get going, and you can adjust the size of your brush that you're working with as well. So now you can see my brush is a little bit smaller. You can also, our feathering is quite high, so I could pull that down a little bit. I like to keep it quite high because it makes it a little bit more gradual when you're making these adjustments, but all of these can be adjusted. What you're going to do when you're happy with your settings is you're just going to paint. So you're just going to paint through this area to just lighten this guy up. Now you can see a little bit of that change there, and then notice there's a pin. Now if I hover over that pin, you can see where I have painted this exposure or this adjustment over this focal point. If I wanted to adjust that, I could always go into erase and I could take some of that out around him. I could add back and then I can paint back in there. So that's always the option that you have as you're going through and adjusting these things. You can also click down here where it says show mask and you can actually see what you're doing. So that gives you some options of being able to understand where you're painting as well. Okay, when you're happy with that, to get out of that menu, all you have to do is click into another tool and you'll go back to your general kind of menu here. And now that I've made this adjustment, if I go in and make any adjustments in the general menu, it will affect everything, including that adjustment brush that I have created over my rabbit. So I'm actually going to create another adjustment brush, and to do that I'm just going to click on the adjustment brush again. Notice that I'm set to new. If I wanted to adjust the old adjustment brush, I could just click on here and then do add or erase. So with this one, I'm going to pull my exposure down, and I'm going to take the contrast back to 0. And I'm going to paint through the grass here so that it just darkens down a bit and makes our little bunny pop out a little bit more. So again, after you've painted with this brush, you can still go in, and now if I wanted to change that exposure a little bit, I could. And really any of these settings I could, and that will only affect that area that I've painted. Notice that right here is my pin for that new adjustment that I've created, so if I hover over there I can see my mask, or I can scroll down to the bottom and show mask, and that'll show me what I have. So once you're happy with this, you can again click back in a regular tool, and then you can continue to make adjustments in your regular menu as well. Now if you want to go ahead and open this into Photoshop, you can click Open Image, or if you hold down the Alt Option key, you can open a copy of this image, and that is sometimes a good thing to do because then you'll have that original image that you can still edit. So if I open a copy, there I have my copy of my rabbit in Photoshop. So you can see this is a very nice way to edit your photos without losing any of the original information, especially if you shoot in RAW and you have those 16 bits of information in your photo, then that will even allow you more flexibility of what you can do. So go ahead and experiment in Camera Raw, and good luck.